Hi, everybody. So this lecture is to walk you guys through Amy Tan's Two Kinds. It's a beautiful story. If you know Amy Tan, she's a Chinese American, and she actually wrote the Joy Luck Club, which some of you may have read. And Two Kinds is a beautiful piece that basically talks about what it's like to be a child of an immigrant in America. And so we have this idea of dual identity throughout the piece. So if you look at the beginning, her mom is a Chinese immigrant who's come to America, and she fully believes in the American dream. She thinks that here you can become anything, you become rich, you can become famous instantaneously, and she kind of pushes that on her daughter, not necessarily because that's what she wants for her daughter, but because she feels like it's the right possibility for what it is to be American. So she says that she had lost everything in China. She lost her family. She lost her own children, twin baby girls. And we know the one-child policy in China, so we're left wondering if that was natural or if that was a decision she had to make. So she's brought her daughter to America, and they're watching sort of all these cultural references are kind of being made. And she's watching Ed Sullivan, she's watching Shirley Temple, and she says, I want my daughter to be like that. So she tries to impose these sort of American standards of beauty and success on her daughter. And she makes her go get the Shirley Temple haircut style, and it looks ridiculous on her, so they cut it all off. And she realizes that maybe she can't make her daughter look American, but she can make her act American, so she can be a prodigy, she can be a success. And so she tries to kind of push her daughter into all of these sort of avenues that the daughter realizes she doesn't want to go into. And we start seeing these sort of push back against the mother and against the sort of Chinese American division that's being pushed on the daughter at this point. So she starts developing these two halves to herself in multiple ways. The part of her that wants to be the prodigy for her mom, she realizes that she says, she personifies it, is getting impatient. And she says, if you don't hurry up and get me out of here, the prodigy portion says, I'm disappearing for good, and then you'll always be nothing. So at the base of this is this fear of failure. And as her mother, she's kind of assimilating to American life. She tries to get her daughter to become a prodigy in more than one way. So she tries to be hyper intellectual, hyper genius, by like a kid that she sees on a TV show who can name all the states. She realizes that that's not her. She tries to do sort of all of these different avenues to make her a child star. And the girl realizes that she's not a prodigy, and she sees something else in herself. She pushes back for the first time. So she kind of starts adopting this American identity where she's actually pushing against her mother's directions and instructions. And we see this pull for her that's an emotional pull. And she sees something inside of herself that is, as she says, angry and powerful. The girl in herself, she's struggling with this idea of being the obedient Chinese daughter, and sort of the young American teenager who doesn't want to be those things. So she starts realizing her own self-will and her own self-worth lies outside of what her mother wants. And this mother-daughter bond really is the central focus of this text. We do have other characters that come in. We see the father. We see Auntie Lindo, who is a friend, neighbor. And she realizes that she's going to push back in the only way she can by not trying. By not becoming successful purposefully to not achieve her mother's dream. So that is her way of rebelling against the culture that's being forced on her. And it doesn't exactly make her happy. It creates this division inside of herself that she can't make whole, whether it's the American and the Chinese side, the sort of American standards of success versus the Chinese standards of success, standards of beauty, also her own sort of impulses as an obedient daughter versus a rebellious, independent person. So one night the mother, she's listening to the Ed Sullivan show. She hears this little Chinese prodigy playing the piano. And she says, that could be you. Look, there's a little Chinese girl doing it. Why can't that be you? So she signs her up for piano lessons with a man who Mr. Chong or Old Chong. And the girl realizes that she tries fighting back. She tries yelling. She tries screaming. She says, I'm not this person. Why are you making me trying to be something that I'm not? And the mother says, I don't want you to be a prodigy. I just want you to try your best. And so she goes to Old Chong, and they have piano lessons. And he's this very nice old man who is deaf and half blind. So she realizes that she can get away with a lot. And so she doesn't practice. She doesn't play right. He doesn't know. So no one's correcting her. And she doesn't self-correct. So she isn't learning how to be fully independent in this sense. And it comes back to really bite her when she has a recital. And when we have Auntie Lindo come over, they realize that there's a sort of competition between the mothers and the daughters, where she realizes that the little girl, Auntie Lindo's little girl, is known as the Chinatown's littlest Chinese chess champion. So there's this sort of competing narrative between the women that isn't supported by a mutually beneficial or supportive relationship. So these female bonds really are the central stories, even though the mother-daughter bond really is the most important one. So they go and they are supposed to have this recital, and she's going to play a piece called Pleading Child, which of course is highly representative. It's a symbolic of who this narrator is, who this girl is. She's trying to plead with herself, plead with her mother, plead with society to rectify her own identity. And the parents invite everybody from the Joylet Club, which is this Chinese sort of friendship group. And we have these multiple references to Chinese culture throughout, with the language and sort of the social structures and different things that are happening. And so we see that kind of narrative integration of immigrant integration. And they go, and she gets up, and she's absolutely confident that she can do it. She plays what she thinks is a fantastic piece, and then she realizes that it was terrible, because the only person clapping for her is Old Chong, because he can't hear. And so she realizes she's not only embarrassed herself, but she's embarrassed her family and her parents. And that embarrassment comes across as anger. And they have an argument, essentially, her and her mother. And she says, this isn't China. I don't have to do what she wants. I'm not her slave, is what she says. And the mom tries to drag her to a piano lesson, and she says no. And this is where the climax sort of comes to a head, and she starts sobbing that the mother wants her to be something that she's not. She'll never be the kind of daughter she wants to be. So she's feeling the struggle as a daughter and as her personal identity split between these two kind of worlds. And the mother says there's only one kind of daughter in this house, the obedient one. And then she says, well, then I wish I wasn't your daughter. And she says something that's really difficult, really heartbreaking to the mom. She feels like worms and things are crawling out of her chest as she's saying that. She knows it's not right. But she basically yells at her mother that she wishes she had never been born like the other ones. So she brings up the two dead twin daughters, and it literally crumbles her mother. She says that her arms went slack. She backed out of the room, stunned, as if she were blowing away like a small brown leaf, thin, brittle, and lifeless. So we have this moment where she's gone too far, and her inability to rectify these two halves of herself directly hurts her mother and their relationship. And she says over and over again throughout her life, she continually finds these disappointments in herself. And her mother eventually sends her the piano. And she feels like it's a symbolic representation of her forgiveness. And so she feels this big burden removed. But she doesn't really do anything with it. Her mother says, you have a natural talent. You could have been a genius. But she doesn't say it bitterly. So she's accepted that her daughter is who she is, even if her daughter hasn't accepted that yet. And so at the very last section, we see that she has gone back home, and she's an adult, and her mother has passed away. So she's folding up her things, and she goes to the piano, and she sees the Pleading Child piece, but she sees another piece that's called Perfectly Contented. And as she starts to play, she realizes they're two very different pieces, but they go together. And she accepts that they are two halves, essentially, in her mind, of the same song. So that's a symbolic representation of two halves of herself coming together and being wholly accepted. So she does accept her identity in the end. She accepts both halves of who she is together. And it's kind of this representation of multiple parts of herself kind of cohesively for the first time existing together. It's her immigrant side and her American side, her rebellious daughter and her obedient daughter, and really her inner understanding of who she is. So that is Amy Tan's Two Kind. So I hope you guys enjoyed it.